There is no doubt that our president was optimistic in the 2025 appropriation presentation. I also agree with those who have contributed that if the budget is implemented the way it is presented, that it portends something good for our country. But then we should not lose sight of the fact that this is a projection, and so the major questions we should ask are whether these projections are realizable and not to sweep it under the carpet that if it is realized. And for it to be realizable, we must look at indices that are on ground. As laudable as the budget may appear, but it also appears that our indices are not completely correct. And so it's not uhuru yet for us as a country. Now, if we take the specifics, which everybody has talked about here, some dancing over it, that we expect a reduction in inflation rate from 36.9 to 15%. That is too ambitious, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues. I don't see how we can achieve that. Even where we achieve the issues of security in 2025, does it follow that immediately the same year that we'll also achieve food security? The answer is completely no. If we achieve security in 2025, we expect fundamental improvement in food security perhaps the following year. But to continue to budget that we are going to achieve security for the country this 2025 and the same 2025 that we're also going to achieve food security is self-deceit. Now, if you also look at the provision for security, which is better than what we have provided before, and look at how much we have paid for ransom within 1 year, you will find out that merely what we are budgeting, it's just 50% more than what we have paid for ransom within the year. The implication is that we are still far from achieving it. As good as it may appear, the budget for security will not take us to the promised land. The revenue target, which we have also projected, is 36.36. And if you also look at the budget, you find out that the revenue sources remain the same, from oil, customs, taxes, and other duties that will be paid by citizens. My prayer and concern is that in achieving this revenue target, let us not overtax our people again. And so this revenue target of 36 might also be overambitious. We should be talking about expanding our sources of revenue. We should be talking about non-oil sector development for the country to earn more. And we should also be talking about, rather than increasing tax, but expanding the tax net. So I also have issues with this target. And then the budget deficit is another source of worry. The deficit still appears to be high. And so I do not see how every Nigerian in 2025 will not go to bed in an empty stomach with this kind of deficit in the budget. It is not possible. That was what Mr. President told us. We also look at the exchange rate. It is projected that we will have an exchange rate of 1,500 per dollar. How are we going to achieve that? Today we are talking about free market, that the exchange rate will be fixed by forces, economic forces. Yes, we ought to plan, but I think that we should look at those economic forces. We are dovetailing between 1,700 and 1,650. What are the things that will improve?
Leader, please can you quickly round up? You know we have only 2 minutes per.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking for the minority, sir.
No, but you cannot speak beyond the 2 minutes because we don't have two rules. The rule is for everyone.
Thank
2
you, sir.
minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I like what I was saying is that the 1,500 exchange rate target, it's also not in line with reality. Now, the area of attention is said to be defense and security, infrastructure, education, and health. My question is, what about human capital development, which is very, very necessary? So I pray that in looking at this budget, honorable colleagues, before we finally pass this budget, we need to capture human capital development as part of our priority as a nation for 2025.
Please, whatever you are unable to speak on, pass the rest to any of our other members who will be given the opportunity to, so that he can continue from where he stopped.
Thank you, sir. Finally, let me just add that there is need for us to consider environmental sustainability. We cannot be planning on an increased daily output in the crude sector, which is the mainstay of the country, and then we also ignore environmental sustainability. We cannot also be planning on that high output without considering the corroded equipment that we still use as a nation, without considering the issue of oil theft, which is still there. So, Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, in summary, what I'm still saying is that the budget we have received might appear very beautiful in its outlook, but there is much more for us to do as a nation. I still see it as the same document that we sit here every year to look at and pass. But it behoves us as parliamentarians to take a deep look into the budget and begin to look at those areas that we need to alter without just standing to dance and rejoice over the budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minority Leader.
Sometimes the internet is making Honorable Mikey feel too comfortable. Video calls and others. Mr. Speaker, my name is Yusuf Adam Gagdi. I represent Panshinkanke Kanam Federal Constituency. I'm from Plateau State. Mr. Speaker, not part of my 2 minutes. It's better to be a legal lover boy than illegal lover boy. Mikey knows what I'm talking about. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that this budget talks about restoration, securing peace, rebuilding prosperity. Mr. Speaker, if there have ever been a presentation that is gearing toward my expectation as a parliament, is a presentation made by Mr. President yesterday. A budget that prioritizes 4 key sectors that have correlation with the mandate of the parliament, making laws for peace, order, and good governance. Mr. Speaker, prioritizing welfare of the citizens and their own security. This budget of restoration, securing peace, building prosperity, really speak to the provision of the Constitution that gave parliamentary powers to Parliament in that regard. What are those 4 key sectors, Mr. Speaker? Defense have the highest allocation. Budget that prioritizes infrastructure, which is the hallmark of any meaningful development. Mr. Speaker, budget that prioritizes education, looking at the number of uneducated persons, illiteracy level and literacy level in Nigeria, looking at our educational infrastructures, budget that prioritize making our education work. Mr. Speaker, welfare of the citizen, budget that talk about the health. These are the 4 sectors that Mr. President concentrated on and prioritizes it. Mr. Speaker, it has been long that Parliament have been constant in trying to have a budget that don't give its strength to debt servicing. If we have a budget that have a 34.8 expected revenue and a deficit of 13%, 13 trillion. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President poses yesterday when he was talking about the deficit, when he was talking about the borrowing aspect of the budget to fund the 2025 budget, he poses and ponder and said to Nigerians that this have to stop. It means that even the borrowing component of the budget, Mr. President is not happy with it. And we are working toward ensuring that we have a budget that will not dedicate our commitment and energy to servicing debt. Mr. Speaker, in my mind and in my own study and understanding of this budget, Mr. President have done justice to it. The only thing that I will conclude, Mr. Speaker, my 1 minute is this. We must do our oversight function to the best of our ability. Mr. Speaker, is not about the executive performance. The success or failure of any budget implementation lies in the ability of the parliament to hold executive arm of government to accountable of taxpayers' money that have been appropriated to them. So I call on Mr. Speaker and the members of the House of Representatives, if this budget fail, very beautiful document presented to us by Mr. President fail, we, the parliament, have failed in discharging our responsibility by holding executive to accountable. The budget is even too small. Considering the exchange rate capacity, if wishes were horses, let's interrogate the budget very well and see other aspects that value should be added to it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the 2 minutes to speak.
Mr. Speaker, I am from Nasarawa State. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this privilege and opportunity to lay my voice on the budget presentation yesterday by Mr. President. Mr. Speaker, a lot has been said on the total component of this budget. I rise to make my own contribution, and very shortly. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the budget, you will all agree with me that Mr. President is well focused and he places Nigerian and Nigerian challenges ahead of every other thing. First, the defense component, 4.9 trillion. Mr. Speaker, you need to secure the nation. We need to secure our boundaries before every other thing. Without security, I believe even agricultural security will be practically impossible to achieve in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, most of the times when we go out seeking re-election, Mr. Speaker, we tend to make a lot of promises, and we tend to forget them as soon as we get into the office. Mr. Speaker, I would like to recall that Mr. President, during his campaign, he made a lot of promises to secure the nation. He made a lot of promises to recruit more personnel. Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind Mr. President and remind ourselves with those covenants we took during our various campaigns. I would like to remind the President, with this 4.9 trillion security, we need to recruit adequate security personnel. We need to engage our youth that are redundant, that are jobless. We need to go to every nook and cranny of this country, Mr. Speaker. If you look at the numbers of our security personnel, it's very meager to compare to our challenges. We don't just need to take what we have to secure sophisticated equipment to fight insecurity, but we need those personnel that will alleviate most of our teeming youth out of the street and provide jobs for them. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I would like to urge the executive to ensure timely release of those budgetary funds when the budget is being approved. Because without the release, this budget that we all stood here to commend it practically would make sense without timely release. And to ensure that we legislators perform our own duties and functions, What are our functions? Our functions is to ensure the oversight that those funds releases are adequately executed. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to lay my voice, and I wish and pray that this budget come to reality, inshallah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable.
I'm from Anambra State. Mine is very simple, Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues. Mr. President yesterday spoke like the man I knew in '99 I voted for in Lagos. Very courageous in the output and what he wants to do for Nigerians. But also there are areas of interest to me and those I represent. The issue of reducing inflation from 34% to 15%, well, let us see how it goes. It's very hypothetical, but we'll watch and see how it goes. And where I came from, or where I come from, were the most traveled Nigerians in this country. We have cried about political marginalization. We have cried about economic marginalization. We are now being pushed to infrastructural marginalization. Mr. President spoke yesterday about the road, west-south road, and Lagos to Sokoto. And we are observers here that Nigerians took loan based on those major infrastructures, but the most traveled Nigerians, I stand to be challenged, don't have means of transportation to even get to where they are going. No road, major road in Southeast. Like my colleague in Labour said that the road that we are there is in L form. What of the triangular form that will take us from Port Harcourt, Enugu to Maduguri road, as it were? Having said that, I am looking at the Southeast Development Commission. It's a new commission. The money I'm seeing that is allocated there is not even enough as a takeoff grant for a commission, as it were. We need, I'll plead with my honorable colleagues to look at it when they are doing their budget debate, as it were, to increase it, because we need much fund as a takeoff grant for such a commission to see if we will have an effective presence. Having said all of that, I think that if this budget is implemented the way it's presented to us, I think Nigerians may probably smile. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Of the budget estimate that was laid before this Honorable House by Mr. President. And Mr. President did that in line with his constitutional role as contained in sections 81 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. And he termed the budget of restoration, securing peace, rebuilding, and prosperity. Mr. Speaker, to my mind, that is a vision of Mr. President for Nigerians for 2025. Mr. Speaker, the budget allocations were made for the budget with security, defense and security, health, and education taking the lead. Mr. Speaker, my problem has always been the implementation of this budget. And so it is my belief that by 2025, the head of MDAs will interpret the president's vision and implement this budget to the letter. That is the only way Nigerians will be satisfied. Mr. Speaker, this morning, I was worried. I watched on channels television, even when members of the National Assembly are doing their job. Our honorable member, Bami Dele, was on that channel's television. He was complaining how an MDA, having noticed an infraction in the Auditor General's report, that he wrote a letter to this MDA 3 good times. They refused to appear, and they also refused to give any reason for not appearing. And so that, what does that interpret? You know, because yesterday, I want to commend the speech you made and that of the Senate President. If you don't work in partnership with the executive for the betterment of Nigerians, we will continue to make the same mistake. And I also want to believe that the head of agencies who should interpret the president's vision will change their attitude for the betterment of Nigerians. Once again, I want to believe that if these budgets are well implemented, we will cease medical tourism. Today in Nigeria, if you go to private hospitals, the medical facilities are better off than
Honorable Uduak,
hospitals.
I thought you had the point of order raised by our dear brother, Honorable
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Igarue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We should try as much as
At
possible
this point, Mr. Speaker,
stick to the subject matter.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I align with the previous speakers in respect to this budget, and I also speak in support of this budget with the maximum level of implementation in 2025. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The President said yesterday, he said, no more shall any Nigerian go to bed hungry. And I agree with him completely. And he said again,
Honorable Amos Gwamna, please can you be attentive?
he said again he wants to reduce inflation from 34% to 15%. I agree with him, so ambitious as it is. Thirdly, he said, we want to depart from lamentation and get into concrete action.
Honorable Zana, you have been promoted to the leadership rank. Please come to this side and sit with the great leader and tap inspiration.
Mr. Speaker, in all of this, I agree with the President. The legacy projects that the President wants to embark on, especially in the area of infrastructure, the two major legacy roads he wants to invest in, has the shape of an L. It runs from Sokoto to Lagos and from Lagos to Calabar. I want Nigeria to remember that there's a section of this country where the infrastructure is highly dilapidated. It does not come into this L shape of that legacy road project. Now, finally, agriculture. I want us to know that agriculture and high food prices and the fact that food became unaffordable by most Nigerians. That was the point of the tipping crisis in this country. And food inflation has driven the high rate of inflation in Nigeria. It must also have to drive back the reduction in inflation. I am happy to note that inasmuch as President did not specify any particular amount allocated to agriculture, he said this much, that there's a nexus between the allocation for defense and to agriculture, because he said that Nigerians have to be safe on the highway and they have to be safe in their farms. I want to emphasize before I sit down, Mr. Speaker, that Nigerian farmers need to be safe in their farm. No matter what it is going to cost us, it will be the reverse point for all our economic woes. Let Nigerians have food to eat, then they can have other things any other time. God bless you.
Thank you, Honorable Dennis.